Notice to Airmen, Jefferson County International Airport.
Accurate, echo traffic, no factor, flight
September 21st, 0900 until 1500 local time. 0S9 is hosting a disaster drill. Anticipate heavier than normal traffic. Exercise extra vigilance for traffic and grounds personnel. Avoid parking in the area adjacent to the red tent east of the space group. 0S9.
Washington Dart is an effort that was inspired by events that happened in California 30 years ago. 1989, Loma Prieta earthquake shook the entire Bay Area, and it dropped 3 bridges, among many others, but it dropped 3 specific bridges that isolated the city of Watsonville, California. Trucks couldn't get in, supplies couldn't get in, store shelves emptied. Within the first week, 300 private aircraft, general aviation aircraft, Cessnas, Pipers, Beechcraft, from 4 different airports around Watsonville flew over 500,000 pounds of supplies into the city and alleviated a great deal of the suffering that was going on in the aftermath of this earthquake. We looked at that up here in Puget Sound and thought, we are due, maybe overdue, for a Cascadia subduction earthquake, and when it comes, and it will inevitably come, it's going to be large. It's going to be a region-wide earthquake. So we thought, if we could generate an effort to organize the pilots so that they could be ready to fly supplies into a lot of these isolated communities, a lot of people are going to be better off. So what we did was go out throughout the state and ask pilots if they would like to be on a list of DART pilots, so that when we have a need for general aviation to fly supplies into isolated areas, we would have a list to start with. We established this list, and then once we had the list going, we started conducting exercises. 2018, we had 2 exercises, and 2019, we've had 2 more, and we plan to hold about 2 exercises every year, flying supplies into one community or another as they establish DARTs in their local communities. All the supplies are donated. All the supplies that go in will go to local food banks, so it's all for a good cause, and it will exercise the system so that supposedly, or hopefully, when we finally have a large-scale disaster in the Puget Sound, we will be ready, we will be exercised, we will be practiced, and we will have an agile and very capable resource that can fly into a lot of smaller places. When we talk to the professional emergency managers, they say with a big enough earthquake here, they're going to be concerned with the I-5 corridor, the 5 million people that are over between Portland and Seattle, and there's a lot of people over there, and that's where their efforts are going to be focused. We're looking at places like Forks, Jefferson County, Island County, and a lot of the other smaller communities around here that will have problems that are no less serious, but may not get the same level of federal attention. What we find is that all disasters are local. That is, when there's a disaster, if we had an earthquake here today, the feds would not look at that and swoop in to help us. In that sense, nothing happens until the sheriff or the local emergency managers, the county emergency managers, ask for help. They ask for help to the state, and if the state can't provide that help, they ask for help to the federal government. And then the help comes in, but there's a very defined and specific time lag that happens. Well, with general aviation, we have no such time lag. If we have supplies in one place and can fly them into another, that's what we plan to do. So that was the idea behind getting the DART, or the Disaster Airlift Response Team, going in Washington State. California was the inspiration for what we did, and they're a little ahead of us in that they have established a DARP, a D-A-R-P, or Disaster Airlift Response Plan. It is a beautiful plan. We thought we would take this plan and adjust it for our needs, but really it is so comprehensive that we've done little more than simply change the names of the players and the phone numbers that are on this plan. It is a phenomenal plan. So we're working in very close proximity with the people in California, because they've already done a fair amount of this stuff. we've taken their plan, and what we find we have to do is give this plan to the local counties. Here's the problem we have as general aviation pilots. If a disaster happens, the local sheriff or the disaster managers request a TFR, or a temporary flight restriction. When that happens, we cannot fly small airplanes into those areas, even if it's for public benefit, unless we are part of a established group that is providing emergency relief. So, for us to be part of that established group, the county itself, each one of the 39 counties in Washington, has to make the DARP, or the Disaster Airlift Response Plan, part of their emergency response plan. Once they do that, and we are part of that DARP, then we can take our airplanes, load them up with supplies, and fly them into an afflicted area, which is what happened when we had the exercise going up to Jefferson County. This year we decided to do the exercise in Jefferson County because they were the next county that has actually adopted a DARP. Next year it'll be Kitsap County, the year after that perhaps Whatcom, and as counties come online, we will gather food from various food drives, we will put them in airplanes, and the exercise will deliver the food to these individual counties, which will be distributed to their food banks and people that need those supplies. In the event of an emergency, the idea would be we can ask people who are not affected by the disasters to help people that are affected by the disasters. One of the scenarios that we're looking at is if we have a subduction earthquake here in Puget Sound. We've got the big offshore plate diving under the big onshore plate. It'll shake everything up. The land either goes up or down depending on who you talk to, but it's going to disrupt bridges, it's going to break culverts, it's going to back up traffic, it's going to stop deliveries. But chances are Walla Walla will not be affected. So earlier this year, in April, we had an exercise where we gathered a bunch of supplies in Walla Walla. Airplanes flew to Walla Walla from 6 different counties. They picked up the supplies in Walla Walla. We had 2 pallet loads. We loaded about 1,500 to 2,000 pounds of supplies, and we flew them into Renton, which would be right in the middle of the supposed disaster area. From Renton, they were transshipped to seaplanes, and those seaplanes then took them up to, in this case, Kenmore on the north end of Lake Washington. But in reality, those supplies could go to any place with a calm stretch of water. They could go up to Island County, they could go to Jefferson County, they could go to Clallam County, they could go to any place with a lake and deliver supplies into those areas. So we were able to use land-based airplanes to go from the far east across the Cascades into the disaster area, and then seaplanes to deliver the supplies around here. On the 21st of September of this year, we held an exercise, and it was the largest exercise we've had to date. We had pilots from 6 counties, Clallam, Whatcom, Island, Jefferson, Kitsap, and Walla Walla, delivering airdrop supplies or air-delivered supplies into Jefferson County. The final count was just over 5,000 pounds of goods. These goods were supplied by Trader Joe's. They were supplied by the Kitsap Churches of Latter-day Saints. They were supplied by Fred Meyer's stores in Kitsap and Whatcom County, and other smaller food drives. But all of these food drives gathered supplies in these different places. On the day of the exercise, we took all of the supplies which had been stored and we started to log and track them. They were put into boxes, the boxes were weighed, the boxes were labeled so that pilots could see how much each individual box weighed, and they could make decisions on how much they wanted in their particular airplane. One of the lessons we learned coming out of Walla Walla earlier this year was that quite often we fill up the airplane before it goes overweight. That is, we cube out before we weigh out. This was interesting. We hadn't expected that, and it was a good lesson learned. If you have large boxes of crackers or bales of blankets, they're going to fill up the airplane before the airplane ever goes above its allowable gross weight. This was an interesting lesson for everybody. In this particular exercise, we had many cans of beans, which are heavy, bags of rice, which are heavy, cases of water, again heavy. So this time we did not have the problem of cubing out first. From Kitsap County itself, we had 11 airplanes, and these airplanes came from Painfield, they came from Camas down south, they came from California. Paul Marshall came up and participated in the exercise.
Hi, I'm Paul Marshall with CalDart. Just coming up to visit the exercise here with your 4 dart operators all collaborating today to put on their dart exercise. Very impressive demonstration. Landing first here at Kitsap County at Bremerton Airport, where I'm dropping in the load of food, the donation from CalDart, which we hope to get over to Jefferson as the weather clears. So CalDart has been incorporated for a year. We started 8 years ago based on the DARP, the Disaster Airlift Response Plan that Rod Ferris wrote and I helped him edit. We did it in the San Martin Airport at first, and then it grew. Watsonville Airport adopted it and created the Watsonville Emergency Air Command Team, REACT. Cal Pilots picked it up. My pilot organization at San Martin is a subchapter of Cal Pilots, and so Cal Pilots picked it up, and we now have 5 dart operators collaborating on an exercise on the 7.9 magnitude earthquake centered on the San Andreas Fault at the Golden Gate Bridge. So the 5 dart operators will connect the 29 GA airports in the Bay Area, doing general air transportation operations as we might do in a real disaster where people need help. Of course, in an earthquake that big, it's expected that surface transportation in the Bay Area will largely be out of commission, and airports may be a very handy way to get around and get things done. So thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So this shows that airplanes can come from all over the state, or in fact all over the region, into a place that has an operable runway and some supplies to deliver. We took the supplies from the supply shed. The local CERT teams were here, and the CERT team is a community emergency response team. These are volunteers that help out in the event of an emergency, and they were the people that logged, labeled, tracked, and loaded the goods onto vehicles. We drove the vehicles out to the airplanes, and they assisted with the loading of the airplanes. In this case, we don't want people who are not familiar with airplanes to load airplanes, but they were there to assist the pilots, to hand out boxes, to indicate the weight of the boxes, so that the pilots could figure out where within the aircraft they wanted to put the weight and how much of the weight they wanted to take. Once the CERT teams and the pilots had loaded the airplanes and completed the paperwork, the pilots took the goods, took the runway, and took off into the skies and went up to Jefferson County. When the airplanes got up to Jefferson County, they pulled up into the unloading areas. The CERT teams came out. They assisted the pilots with unloading. They tracked all the goods, so we had an excellent record of exactly what had gone up there. They helped move the airplanes around, and then the pilots were free to depart to whichever airport they needed to go home to. The biggest lessons we learned during this particular exercise were, I think, 2. One was the use of the CARS radio system here in Kitsap County. The local ham operators set up portable stations. They just drove their trucks in.
We're supporting the local disaster airlift response team food flight exercise today, and our primary mission is to send information to our emergency operations center, and they'll forward that information on to the receiving airport
and contact other stations. They were able to contact Jefferson County, let them know that specific airplanes were coming and what those airplanes were carrying, or the kind of weight that they could expect. They let them know the departure times and the expected arrival times, so that when they got up to Jefferson County, those same radio operators up in Jefferson County radioed back, let Kitsap County know that those aircraft had arrived and their goods were being unloaded. So at that point, we had not control, but at least we had information on where all the pieces of the exercise were going. The second thing that we learned was that paperwork was important. In April, when we went from Walla Walla to Renton, we transported 1,500 pounds of goods, but it was mainly an exercise in transporting the goods. We did not keep records of anything we'd done. This time, every can of beans had been logged, it had been weighed, it had been labeled, and it was tracked so that we could tell where any one particular donated item started, was transported, on which aircraft, and where it ended up. So these two things in the event of an emergency will be incredibly important, and that's what we were exercising this time around. We will continue to hold these exercises. There are two more that'll be shortly scheduled for next year and for the foreseeable future, so that we can bring more and more of these resources online, so that we can integrate with the existing emergency management structure, both at the state and the federal level, as well as the locals. If you're a pilot out there and would like to participate, it's pretty simple. Check down below, and if you will send me an email just to george.steed@gmail.com with the word DART in the subject line, I will send you a Google form. When you fill out that form, which simply tells me how we can contact you and what the capabilities of your aircraft are, you fill out that form and hit send, suddenly you're on the list. There's never an obligation.